So that's where we get the myth of the Hyperboreans. Hyperborean just means the super north. Borea is the Latin word for north. And we get this myth of the Hyperboreans, this elite class of sort of shaman, hyper-cosmic entities that live inside the earth and access it through the North Pole. They're sort of anthropomorphic stag gods. They show up in earth mythologies and the ancient mythologies as these sort of hand-like stag gods. Here we have a few. We have, as far back as 16,000 BC, we have the drawing in the middle, the anthropomorphic figure, the stag bull with the serpent. Then we have Marduk to the right. We have on the top of this collage, we have Churn, the Celtic stag god, again sitting in the posture of Buddha with the serpent, surrounded by animals. Then we have to the left, around 8 or 9,000 BC from the Americas, we have the stag anthropomorphic figure with the symbol of the solar sphere on his shoulder. And again, these are all symbols of the same sort of shamanic priest class that had the mythology of the stellar cult, the stellar and fertility cults of what kept ancient human beings in population after these catastrophic events. They would bring this religion back out and enforce it after these catastrophes. So Julian James, Princeton University psychologist, in his book The Origin of Consciousness and the Breakdown of the Bicameral Mind, says throughout Mesopotamia, from the earliest times of Sumer and Akkad, all lands were owned by gods and men were their slaves. Of this, the cuneiform texts leave no doubt whatsoever. Each city-state had its own principal god, and the king was described in the very earliest written documents that we have as simply the tenant farmer of the god. Many scholars have gone into this concept. Nephilim, the heroes, the demigods, the avatars, the Lama, the Rephaim. They're all ancient titles for the hybrid offspring of these alien masters. Joseph Campbell went into the hero myth with great detail in his book, The Hero with 1,000 Faces. So what really has been going on? We can read the myths, we can read the stories, but what are we to make of all this? Are we to take this seriously? Is there any way to gain some truth from all of this? It turns out that the descendants of Atlantis regrouped with their shaman priests and emerged as the bloodthirsty kings of Sumer, while the Lemurians dispersed throughout the world. However, the Lemurians also consolidated in Egypt and became the high cultures of Egypt. Writing was developed and mythologies were put into an exoteric form for the public so the elite could use them as a controlling device. The kings were now ruling on behalf of the gods. They were no longer declaring that they were gods themselves, but descendants of the gods. Sumer then became Babylon, which is modern-day Iraq. The stories of the old world became myth and spread throughout the empires of the ancient god kings. But the infrastructure was set, and mankind would continue to bring gold to the kings and labor for their cause, as, to some degree, we all still do. An interesting thing is that in the book of Joshua, in the Bible, the geographic areas that Joshua failed to rid of these Nephilim tribes, Joshua was Moses' predecessor, these areas that he failed to rid of these Nephilim offspring are the same geographic areas of the Middle East that are in high dispute today. The same 33.33 area of the Gaza Strip, northern Jerusalem. During the fabled first time, Zep Tebi, as it's called, when the gods ruled in their country. They said it was a golden age during which the waters of the abyss receded. The primordial darkness was banished, and humanity, emerging into the light, was offered the gifts of civilization. They spoke also of intermediaries between gods and men, the Urshu, a category of lesser divinities whose title meant the Watchers. That's by Graham Hancock in Footprints of the Gods. The ancient name for Egypt was Kem, which means black. Many scholars accept now that at some time during the pre-dynastic period in Egypt around 3400 BC, a new group of people arrived in Egypt, and that this incursion resulted in profound changes in many aspects of the Egyptian civilization. These newcomers gradually assimilated over a period of several hundred years, and from this assimilation grew the society which created dynastic Egypt. The people of this incursion are known as the dynastic race, and their origin is unknown. Egyptologists have looked at the burial customs between the pre-dynastic periods of Naqada I and Naqada II and pit them against the dynastic periods. They noticed that the continuation of the separate racial type amongst the bodies of the nobility in the early periods is based upon cranial size and other anatomic variations, which means there are cranial differences between these two racial incursions of people, the original indigenous people and the incursive race. It's believed that the separateness of the ruling class in the early periods was the result of this early racial distinction, and that the lower levels of society descended from the subjugated indigenous population. It is also believed that at some point during the Naqada II period, the so-called dynastic race was indeed the race to expose Egypt to much of its cosmological and technological knowledge, such as writing, reading, and cosmology. We can see here the cranial differences that the archaeologists are talking about. We see Nefertiti, and actually we see Akhenaten with the cranial discrepancy, and they portray themselves with oversized craniums. Again, it's depicted in Egyptian tombs and Egyptian steles. Again, the Sumerians depicted these reptoid creatures with these sort of oversized craniums, or these cone-shaped craniums. We have trepanning found all over the world, which shows early signs of brain surgery. These people with these holes in their heads lived many years after this. To the right we see an X-ray of an actual skull that has an oversized cranium. These are found all over the world. They're found in Peru, they're found in Egypt, they're found in Africa, they're found in North America. Now, we don't know if these people were doing this purposely to mimic some sort of other alien culture, or if it's a genetic quality they had. So we don't know the reason behind this. We know that they were doing it. We know they portrayed themselves in their art as having this feature, this elite type of skull. We see it in the Hindu cults also. It's a sign of kingship. The Christian church, P.D. Uspensky says, the Christian form of worship was not invented by the fathers of the church. It was taken in a ready state form from Egypt. Only not from the Egypt that we know, but one from which we do not know. He says this Egypt was the same place as the other, but it existed much earlier. Only small bits of it survived in historical times, and these bits have been preserved in secret and so well that we don't have access to them. The hieroglyphic system is not Indo-European, though it has certain similarities, nor is it Hamaic, although it has certain similarities. Therefore, it's called Indo-European Hamaic. Unlike every other language in history, the development of Egyptian language peculiarly has no developmental period, and again, the writing system has seemed to spring from nowhere in the Naqada II period as a full-blown system of writing. Again, we have the Dendera zodiac found in the Temple of Hathor around 3000 BC, shown intact representations of the zodiac and the zoomorphic figures, starting, if you look at this, around 9 o'clock. If you look at 12 o'clock compass point situation here, we have at 9 o'clock Pisces, 2 fish, and rotating around that we have all 12 of the points in green.